Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Blue is the New White podcast. We have got another great guest for you today. A mutual connection actually put us in touch, Miss Elizabeth Moses. If you haven't heard her episode yet, definitely go back and check it out. You won't regret it. And we are trying to get her back on the show in the next couple of months as well. So definitely stay tuned. But today, Nick McIntosh joins us to talk about his journey through the trades. He figured out what he wanted to do while still in high school, and that was go into carpentry. And boy, he hit the ground running. Getting right into the trade after graduating, he quickly learned what he needed to know and then started a home building business of his own. Eventually, he found his way to SAIT, where he serves as in the R&D department as the Senior Materials Testing and Fabrication Specialist. I bet you didn't know that was a thing. Listen in as we go over common perceptions of the trades, the opportunities therein, and what success looks like in this industry. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and on our website at blueisthenewwhite.com to receive all the latest updates. You can now find this podcast on iHeartRadio, SiriusXM, and Pandora. As always, we rely on word of mouth from our listeners to further the mission. So, if you enjoy this episode, please take a second to rate it, review it, and share it with your friends. The future generations of tradespeople depend on it, which means they depend on you. So thank you again and enjoy this episode of the Blue is the New White podcast with Nick McIntosh. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Blue is the New White podcast. I'm excited about my guest today. Nick, man, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here, sir.
Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm excited to get to know you a little bit better. For context, we were introduced through a mutual connection, Elizabeth Moses, who has been on the show before, and actually we're planning on getting her on the show again. So if you haven't caught that episode, definitely go back, check it out. She's an awesome person, great advocate of the trades, and she's come a long way even since we last spoke. But today we're going to get to know Nick. Nick, why don't you kind of introduce yourself, tell us who you are, where you came from, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously my name's Nick McIntosh. I live in Calgary, Alberta, up in the northern Canada, I guess, not northern Canadian, but so I work at the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology right now in the Green Building Technologies Department. I'm kind of the guy here who's got the trade background. So my official title is a bit of a mouthful. It's Senior Materials Testing and Fabrication Specialist. So I think that's just their fancy corporate way of saying the guy who came from the trades. So
can you say that one more time? Senior Materials, that's all I got.
Senior Materials Testing and Fabrication Specialist. So take that with a grain of salt or however you want to take that. But that's what it is. So yeah, what I do here is we are a kind of a research and development role kind of department. So we've developed some curriculums in terms of green building practices for residential construction, deep energy retrofit curriculum. And so I've been helping with that in terms of how kind of more contractors will look at it, because in my background, I also run a home building company with my wife. And so I still kind of have that foot in the industry to understand how everybody in this industry is feeling. So we get a little bit of both instead of just sitting in this building and kind of losing touch on that, right? So it's quite beneficial for everybody. So, but my background is I am a journeyman carpenter. Started out framing, and then I had the lucky opportunity to work for a guy out in a mountain town called Canmore, Alberta. He was from New Zealand, and in New Zealand, they do the carpenters do the house pretty much start to finish. So I was able to touch on, doing foundations, doing some timber work, joinery, and then framing and interior finishing as well. So I've got a pretty well-rounded background in the aspects of residential carpentry. So I'd have to say my favorite is definitely joinery. But not everybody is doing joinery, as it's obviously slightly expensive. So, but that's definitely been my favorite part of carpentry. So,
all right, I'm going to stop you. I'm going to stop you there real quick. Just for the listeners who are interested in the trades, can you explain what that is?
Oh yeah, okay. So joinery, the best way for me to explain it, I guess, is you've probably seen timber framing, like those nice big houses in the mountains where they've got those big fir or cedar. In our area, fir is the most common. I'm not sure what it is necessarily in the States or whatnot. So it's joinery essentially is you can make large structural members without having to necessarily use, screws and nails. So it's mortise and tenons and doweling and stuff like that, and dovetails and whatnot. But I'm sure any cabinet makers are very familiar with dovetails, but it's on a bit of a bigger scale. So
right.
It's kind of what, in my opinion, I think of when I think of a carpenter, using a chisel and chiseling out wood and making things fit nice and tight and and making structures like that, right? So,
I grew up on a farm, and there was a big barn that was built in 1884, and that's the whole thing was constructed just like that.
Oh yeah, there's some very interesting stuff on YouTube in terms of like Japanese joints and joinery. If you're interested in looking at some of that stuff, it's absolutely insane.
That's crazy, and that's definitely, there's an art form to that. But we'll get to that. Let's get back to your story. How did you get into this?
So how I got into carpentry and construction in general is I was in high school, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I think I remember they had a career fair there one time when I was in like grade 10 or something. And I was like, oh yeah, somebody had a hotel management booth or something like that. So I was like, oh, I'm going to be a hotel manager. That'll be awesome. Cruise ship manager. And, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And then when I got into high school, the construction teacher there, he had just finished university. So he was a very kind of similar age to us. I think it was one of his first jobs out of school. And I went in the shop class, and he made shop extremely fun. And pretty quickly I decided that I kind of wanted to pursue the home building career and go from there. So he definitely made it fun. And sorry about that. I attended he invited me to attend the skills competitions for carpentry. So I did that in high school. And then after I graduated, went to the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, where I currently work, to do my schooling and my apprenticeship throughout in those 4 years right out of high school. So I would definitely have to say I give major credit to my high school shop teacher for kind of making it fun and enjoyable for his students, and showing you that the world of construction isn't necessarily what it can be made out to be sometimes. From what you see, right? So
absolutely. That's incredible. So when you were in high school, was there a push for you to go to university, even though you didn't know what you want to do, or was it kind of up in the air? I mean, what did that look like?
Our school wasn't too bad. Like, we have the school that I graduated from it had like a welding as well. So in grade 10 and 11, I took welding, and then in grade 12, I dropped welding to do, there was a select few that kind of got selected for the advanced construction course. So we built sorry.
No, you're good.
Built a decently large structure for a camp, kind of commissioned us to build a structure to let everybody, we got the chance to, do some big size scale stud framing and truss installation and siding and all that. So we kind of got a whole, essentially almost every aspect of the home building industry. So we got to do the electric in it. We got to do the obviously being monitored and approved by a journeyman after the fact, right? So we did the insulation. I don't recall if we did drywall or anything like that. I think we just plywooded it, but because it was just going to be a large kind of storage shed. So but our school wasn't too bad, because it did have a decent trades training area. So there was a big automotive area, welding, the construction, the cabinetry, and then now I think they even are teaching electrical as well. So in terms of high school that kind of pushes you a certain direction, I never really talked to any guidance counselors or anything like that, because I figured out pretty quickly after joining construction or the carpentry class, that's kind of what I wanted to do. So I would say that school was pretty good in terms of not, pushing that kind of that university aspect. But then again, I didn't really talk to anybody about career paths because I decided decently quick what I was going to pursue. So,
all right, right on. Well, and
Yeah.
you know what? Honestly, it's a testament to the school that you went to, because whether you talk to anybody or not, like I didn't talk to anybody either, but my counselor had me in his office once every 2 weeks, senior year, saying, "Hey, why didn't you want to go to college?"
Yeah.
You know, and so, a little bit different, but that sounds great. One of the things I'm curious about, and we were kind of talking a little bit about it before the show, is, even though there wasn't a huge university push, and, it sounds like there was a lot of trades options available in your high school. Did anyone, or was anyone able to truly articulate to you what kind of avenues you can go to in the trades? Like you, for instance, I'm listening to you talk, and, you got into carpentry, and you also mentioned you have your own business, and I think that from what I've seen, there's this pedestal, right? Or this goal that people have of being a business owners in particular. I'm just using that as an example. But they don't really see the path of how trades can get them there.
Yeah.
It's always, well, how can I be a consultant, or how can I, be a social media influencer, or, some of these other entrepreneurial things that you hear floating around. So tell me, what was that like, and what have you found?
To be completely honest, I don't recall ever kind of having that sort of discussion about where you can go from there. From what I can recall, I don't remember ever kind of being told, if you go become a carpenter, you can do this.
Mm-hmm.
I'd kind of set my goals decently young, I think that, and my goals have changed over the years, which, happens to everybody. But my initial goal was, once I graduated, I was going to go, get my journeyman ticket, then start climbing the ladder up a home building company or whatever, right? Be a supervisor, then a project manager, and then a GM or whatnot, right? So, and then my goals kind of shifted, and it was, well, I would like to start my own company and go from there. So I don't really recall there being any sort of, sit down and tell you the avenues that you can go being a tradesperson. But I also can't recall if there wasn't necessarily. So
Sure.
It's been a decent amount of time, and my goals have changed, and I just kind of figured out the avenues. I think like I said, I can't quite remember if there was any sort of situation like that.
That makes sense. And either way, I guess the point is that that these avenues are available, right? And that people should and need to know, especially if they have any inclination to be part of a trade, that it can take them, I mean, hell, anywhere they want to go, really. I mean, I've seen tradespeople, like you, start their own businesses. I've seen tradespeople transition into sales roles, into management roles, leadership roles, executive roles, entrepreneur, if you call it, this is sometimes what they're called. But I mean, it's just amazing. And oftentimes the dots aren't connected, right? They all exist, but there's nobody there to say, hey, you can take this from point A to point B to point C, if that's how you define success.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if mine was conventional or not. I don't think there is any sort of conventional way to get where anybody is anyways. I know people that went to school for biology and are now working in new home sales, right? So it's kind of like, well, that 4-year degree in biology, you're not using that in new home sales, right? And so it's,
unless they have really big fish tanks.
Yeah, exactly. So that's an unconventional, well, finger quotes, unconventional way to go, right? So, but there isn't a conventional way to go. So it's like I said, my goals changed along the way. Then I started my own company, and even since I've started my company, my goals changed as well. We initially started just doing fences and decks and kind of more carpentry sort of stuff, and then we had an opportunity to get a lot from a developer when nothing was really selling one year, and we approached them and we're like, if you need some lots to get rid of, we're more than happy to get a loan and take one and build a house and sell it. And that worked out well, and and we've built within our company, we've built now, I think four full new builds, and then a whole whack of renovations and things like that, and all that good stuff. But yeah, our goals changed, and my wife, she joined the company. She's a business major and a marketing major, so she joined in. And I'll fully admit right up front, I'm not a good businessman. So her coming in was a huge help. If anybody's thinking of it, then there is that business side that you have to pay attention to, because if that lag's behind, which, if I'm full disclosure, it fell behind a little bit with me, and then she comes in and took right over that and did a killer job of that. And she's also an interior designer, so we kind of diversified our offerings. So and then like I said, now I work at a post-secondary institution in kind of a research and development role. So I'd say I've become decently white collar. I'm actually recording from my shop here at SAIT, so I've got a little welding booth in the back, so I still get to do a little bit of trade work, and we just had a tent come down that all that stuff is being stored in here now that we're setting up a new tent to be able to get out there. But there's becoming a carpenter was just the start, and there's many different ways to go. I never would have ever thought that I'd be working at SAIT when I was getting my journeyman ticket in this sort of role, right? So you just kind of never know where it's going to take you. So
absolutely.
But obviously I push for educated trades, so I encourage people to kind of continue their education. So I won't say that I just got my journeyman ticket and then things kind of opened up for me. I definitely, I did some courses overnight or in the nights and evenings and things like that and whatnot. So I definitely recommend people continuing their education if they can and want to, then it just opens even more doors, right? So
absolutely. And education is so important, and I don't want anyone to misconstrue, and I don't think anyone does at this point after 140 episodes, but I mean, there's this stigma right out there, and there's so many stigmas. I don't even know why I mention it anymore, but we're not against college, right? At least I'm, for my advocacy, I'm not against college. I'm for the right education for the right individual, right? And if that is a college education because you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a CPA, something that requires it, then absolutely, by all means, that debt is going to produce you an ROI. But if you don't know, or if you love to work with your hands or something like this, what I hate is when we push these people into the wrong education anyways, because there is the right education, right? To your point, I've seen people, not go to college, not go to university, get into a trade after high school and build their way up to owning their own business. But then they want to your point, they want to learn more about business. So they go back to college, right? Yep. And at least at that point, they have an objective. Now you're lucky you have a wife that will do that, right? So you two are complementary that way, but the option exists. If you didn't have that option, you could go back to school and that you would get an ROI from that education. Yep. So, that's what we talk about on this show.
Kind of expanding on that point there that you had, Josh, it's something that I've been kind of saying recently is you can get a degree online. It's, I won't ever say it's not a lot of work. I don't have a degree, and anybody that does have a degree, like, that's fantastic. I don't think I could do it. And like you said, if that's the route you want to go, then that's fantastic. We need those people as well, right? There's jobs for everybody. But you can get a degree online. You can't get a journeyman certificate online, right? Like,
that's a fair point.
So I always kind of recommend, if you're coming out of high school and you're thinking about doing just 4 years of construction or some construction just to fill some time and think about what you want to do, then in my opinion, there's no reason, if you're thinking about doing it anyways, you take 2 months out of the year I'm not sure how it is necessarily in the States, but obviously up here in Canada, we do, for the most part, most trades are you spend 2 months in school sort of deal and you're working the rest. So why not take those 2 months out of each year? Depending on the company you work for, you might be getting paid EI to go to school anyways, right? So, and if after that 4 years, you're like, this is great, let's keep going with this, or you're like, all right, well, I did that and that was fun, but let's see if I can incorporate it with a degree as well, or just, if you just want a complete change, then go right at it. Right. So,
Oh, absolutely. And these are the narratives that we should be talking about. And speaking of narratives, and I'm listening to you talk, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, after high school, you got right into the trade, you worked your ass off there. You started your own business. We all know how much work that takes, right? And now you're doing that, plus you're an instructor, for SAIT. And so, that kind of leads us into the next discussion of, this perception of work-life balance in the trade, and what that kind of looks like. I know that you had wanted to touch a little bit on this, so what's your thoughts revolving this work-life balance in these industries?
Yeah. So I just have to correct you there, Josh. I'm not actually an instructor at SAIT.
Oh,
I'm an employee of SAIT, but not an instructor. So
got it.
In that research and development role. But on that note, I I will be instructing the Passive House Trades course that is happening in Calgary. So I kind of have that going on as well. So it's a lot of different avenues, right? So, but yeah, so in terms of that work-life balance, I just, having been in the trades, I find that sometimes it can be just a lot of guys, we will, like I mentioned with my high school, there wasn't so much a push to go to university. So most of my close friends are tradespeople. Like my one good buddy is a welder, sorry. Another good buddy of mine's an iron worker. Another good buddy of mine's a plumber. Another good buddy of mine is a ceiling texturer. So I've actually had a decent amount of tradespeople in my group, just from my friends group out of school that went that way. But sometimes you get into that, well, I worked 80 hours this week or whatever. Like you kind of are almost bragging about how much you worked and how exhausted you are, right? And I would say I was guilty of that, being like, oh, I want to be the guy that worked the hardest, right? And
Yep.
and in my opinion, looking back on it, it's like that. Yeah, I learned a lot, and it was, if you're having a fun time working, then fantastic, keep doing that. But I certainly would say that I missed out on some things just because I was working so much. So a big thing that I kind of push is this, in the trades, how come we're so much arguing about how hard we worked when I would much rather spend time. I've got a 2.5-year-old son. I would much rather spend time with my son than be at work, in my opinion. And I understand that that's not necessarily how it goes. Running my own business and everything, you've got to get stuff done or you're not making money. But that kind of ties into something else that I think happens where, certain, if in the home building world, sometimes anyways, the mistakes of others, if a supervisor schedule's a little bit gone sideways, then they can kind of put that pressure on the trades to make up that time. And then it just end up becoming a perpetual motion of that happening all the time. Right. So it's, in my opinion, sometimes that kind of mindset in the industry can really affect that work-life balance that people should be, in my opinion, trying to strive for. Because, like I said, I enjoy spending time with my son, and I'd much rather do that. Yeah. I don't want to be on my deathbed saying, oh man, I worked really hard, but I really wish I spent more time with my family. Right. So
yes, no one ever sits on their deathbed and says that I wish I spent more time away from home.
Yeah. And I don't want any supervisors or anybody out there to take offense to that.
I don't think so.
My opinion. So.
Honestly, I think that, I understand what you're saying. And listen, I relate to it too. There for a long time, so I own my own business here in Arizona, and we've gotten quite big over the years. And I remember, when I was still running service and I was still in the field, my objective was to make sure that I was the first one there and the last one to leave. Didn't matter why, didn't matter when, didn't matter what I was doing, but I thought that me as the leader of the organization, I had to be there first and leave last.
Yeah.
And it was this perception, that we come up with in the trades, that work rules all. And it's not until, I think you grow up a little bit that you come to understand that that's not exactly how it is. You can achieve that respect, while also achieving a work-life balance. Because like you, I've got young kids at home, right? And I'm glad that I worked as much as I did, in retrospect, because I'm able to spend that time with them now. But had I had my kids any younger, I would definitely have missed out on a lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
That I know people out there miss out on, which sucks.
Yeah. And I think that can kind of tie back as well to, a lot of industry is everybody's kind of a subcontractor of everybody, right? So, and it is something that I think can push people out of the trades, because you do have to sometimes just start your own company just to be able to work for somebody. If you're, I know a lot of framers, it's the framer's a subcontractor to the builder, and all of his employees are subcontractors to him, right? So and then you see like a job posting for, like SAIT, a big thing that I really liked about SAIT was the benefits package, right? That's something that's not offered in a lot of blue collar worlds, right? So you kind of just have to keep working perpetually just to be able to kind of afford certain things, right? And I know that Canada and the United States vary slightly in terms of what each of our kind of tax dollars go to. So, in Canada, we've got universal healthcare. So there's certain times we don't have to think so much about that. But I know that in the States, it might be different, where guys just have to work to be able to afford to potentially go to the doctor maybe or whatnot. Mm-hmm. Right. So, so that's something that I think can also kind of push people away from blue collar, is just that sort of, that kind of work-life mentality.
Absolutely.
And whatnot, right.
And back to your other point too, about how, sometimes the trades are asked to make up errors or time or whatever it is, when somebody makes a mistake, this is common in these industries, right? And I don't know that it's talked about enough, but I relate it back to, there's a saying that I like to live by, and it's you get what you tolerate. Right. So, the more it's tolerated, the more it's looked at as just the norm, the more it's going to happen, quite honestly. And, I don't think it's like, hey, we need to take a stance here. I think it's just a shift in mindset, a shift in perception, right? Like, hey, these are the responsibilities, and these are how these responsibilities are distributed. That's all that needs to really happen. But to your point, that piles right on top of this work-life balance that we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it in my kind of younger career, when I was just started a framing crew and whatnot, and we were framing houses, and we were working for some, more production builders, and I will, again, fully upfront, I am not a fast carpenter. I'm not a fast framer. And I like to make sure that we're doing it right. And, I think a lot of guys out there are doing it right, but there are times where it can be kind of, get this done. We got to get up. Right. So then, that's when the mistakes or omissions are made. So when I went through a very angry part of my life doing that, where it's just, I wasn't meeting my quality standard, and I wasn't meeting the, certain builders, speed standard as well. Right. So it just kind of was, I'm right in that middle ground of not being happy with anything that's really going on, right, from both sides. So it just kind of, I went through a pretty angry time in my life, and then went like, all right, no, we're going to focus on just our stuff, things that I've got control over. And for one, I've been much happier since kind of making that decision to do that. And, I understand not everybody can do that, but it's, if the trades are the guys kind of pushing that, then it's like you said, what comes first, the horse or the cart or whatnot, right? So, but so that's kind of how I feel about that, right? So
that makes sense, and and I want to make sure that we're countering these points too, right? Because there's things that are being talked about now in the trades that are good for the trades. Like this conversation that we're having right now is good for the trades. Right. And I don't want some of the things that we're talking about to deter anybody from looking into this line of work. So one of the next questions I want to ask is, what have you gained or what have you gleaned from your career in the trades. I mean, why? I can tell by the way that you're talking and you know what you've told me your path was that you know this is something that you love, right? You're an advocate of these industries, you know, and you know for a reason. So tell me, what have you learned over the years from the trades, and why do you love what you do so much?
Yeah. No, and sorry, just to, I guess, backtrack. Like you said, I'm not trying to scare anybody off or anything like that. It's saying that they're going to get into the blue collar world and just be like, oh my God, all I do is work. It's yeah. Like I said, I'm not trying to do that either. I am a big advocate for, you know, educated trades and quality tradespeople and, you know, having that kind of establishing that work-life balance, right? But so just to expand on that point, but in terms of what I've learned in the trades, it's, you know, you do definitely learn a work ethic. I have definitely gotten a valuable work ethic. It's funny because the perception of, you know, you're going to get kind of beat up in the trades and, you know, you might have a bad back or knees or whatnot right after a while. I kind of say, well, I was actually probably the healthiest I've ever been when I was, you know, doing framing. I can eat, I mean, I'm not a calorie expert, but I could eat 3,500 calories a day and not do anything. And I'm maintaining my fit stature, I guess, right? Then you come into a office job and still trying to, you know, I'm used to eating all that food to be able to actually maintain just my day. And then you eat that and you're like, oh my God, I, you know, quickly swell up to for me, you know, 200 plus pounds, which doesn't happen too often. And it's just like, oh my goodness. And then, you know, going playing hockey at night and you're winded, but it, yeah. So it's, in terms of what I've learned, you know, I found that I just, like I said, it kept me a nice kind of active lifestyle. For one, just naturally happening that you know, every time I get off the tools, I kind of am like, oh man, I miss being on the tools every single time that I come off of them. Right. So, you know, there's a point where I went to just trying to project manage our stuff. And it was like, I really miss the tool. So we went back to doing the framing and interior finishing and certain things for our company and whatnot. So, you know, and it's in terms of learning, I guess, I don't really know what I would say that I've learned, but just kind of things that I've established over the years or whatnot. Right. And that would be one of them. The biggest one for me is that, it helped me maintain an active kind of healthy lifestyle without having to work at it essentially. Right. Like now it's like, oh my God, I got to find time either in the morning or the evening to go to the gym. And it's like, well, then that work-life balance, does it get any better because I'm not with my son because I might have to try to go to the gym to just stay in shape?
Fair point.
Right?
That's a fair point, man. And you know, thank you for bringing that up too. I have that in my book. You know, and I wrote that exact same thing that you know, there's a lot of people that argue that you know, the trades is hard on your body, and some trades are, don't get me wrong, right, to your point, you know, but you know, there's an element to that if you take care of yourself too, right, that it can actually be very healthy for you and help keep you in shape. And so to your point, you know, are you spending that same time away now because you have to go to the gym to maintain, you know, a healthy physique?
Well, and my first framing boss put it excellently. I was sitting there, you know, first thing he did was get me to move a whole whack at 20-foot long 2x6s from the front of the house to the back and lean them up for him to pull up. Right. And he goes, just think of it. I'm paying you to work out. So he's like, if you really care about it, like think about your form and what you're doing, like you're deadlifting and doing overhead pushes or whatever. Right. So when I'm trying to throw up a floor, because we didn't have a Zoom boom back when I started. So, you know, if we're sheeting the second floor, I'm leaning the sheets up against the side of the house and throwing them up to him. And it's like, all right, well, I'm deadlifting. So you kind of, if you actually just kind of paid attention to your form, you're like, I am exactly doing what he said. He's paying me to work out and then just, you know, nail things together. Right. But to that point, I would also, you know, in terms of if you're working in an office, you might be unhealthy in a completely different way, right? Being a bit more, I don't know the correct term, sedentary or sedimentary or whatnot.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, you know,
there was a study done that showed that sitting for 8 hours a day is just as bad for you as smoking and eating fast food.
Oh yeah. and if you're not working on your posture, sitting incorrectly or something like that, right? Like, yeah, you might look completely healthy on the outside, but it could be different. And not saying that it is and whatnot,
Absolutely.
but
No.
it's what it is, right? So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's important, I think, for people to know. I love that take. It's not a take that we talk about often on the show. So we actually, I could sit and talk to you all day, and we might have to do another episode because there's a ton more that I want to ask you that we just didn't get to today. But I do want to close with a question I like to ask everybody. Because one of the things that we talk about on this show heavily is success, right? Success in the blue collar trades, success around the trades, parallel to the trades, and how it can enable that success for so many different people, right? By those people's definition, which is, the whole point. We can't just stuff everybody into the same box and say this is what success looks like, because we're all different. So I'm curious, Nick, how do you define success, and how are the trades helping you achieve it?
It's a good question. It's interesting because I would say my definition of success has changed. I'm not that old, but my definition of success has changed several times since I have thought about what success is, but It used to be climbing a home building industry and making a bunch of money and whatnot. And I'd say now my success is what I would gauge as success is more just, building things to the best quality that I can. And how can I get other people interested in it and, getting educated and whatnot, obviously with my background in kind of the green building area and with how codes and the world's going and whatnot. I think that the more educated people are, the better it is for everybody, because some people might try to do some of these green building practices. And if you don't know what you're doing necessarily, you can sometimes end up doing more damage than good, right? So what I would gauge as success now in terms of myself is, being happy really for one, and that work-life balance, being able to spend time with my family, and being able to have it so that my son can kind of, and if we have another kid, then they can, we can get them in all the sports that they want to. I kind of have deviated a bit away from that. Let's make a bunch of money, get a lake house and all that stuff, right? It's more just kind of, let's just be happy and content with what we're doing, right? So that's, I would say that's my biggest gauge of success, is if I'm happy and my family's happy, right? So how can we make that happen? And in terms of how the trades have kind of dictated that, it used to be that I would, like I said, I would want to climb that industry and that company and be the tippy top. And the farther I kind of got into it, it was just the more I found, it's more calming to me to sit down with a router and chisels and play around than it is to do the other stuff, right? So kind of chasing that grind, if you will, I guess. So, but that's my vision of success.
Awesome, man. I love it, and very well put. And I think that a lot of people will relate to that, having a similar mindset. So thank you, Nick, for sharing that and for coming on the show. Before we jump off, for those who don't know, where can they find you?
So myself, I'm Nick McIntosh on LinkedIn. My wife and I's company has an Instagram account, McIntosh Living. And then obviously the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. I'm a very small fish in this large pond here, but at SAIT we offer all the trades programs, and then there's also some degree programs that we've got here, and then continuing education. So even if it's not finding me, SAIT has a lot of great opportunities for that continuing education, and a lot of great opportunities for that, that green building education that they push for. And then also that, Passive House Canada, I can't recall what the one in the States is right now, but that's another big one that I'm a part of that I like to tell people about in terms of getting that kind of that energy efficiency education as well. So, but
awesome. Well, Nick, thank you so much. I know you're a busy guy, but I really do appreciate you coming on the show and sharing that insight with our listeners. I know they're going to appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no, thank you.
All right. Have a good day, sir.